Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite books of the year. So let's just get right into it. So I actually sort of feel like as a whole, I didn't have a very good reading year this year. I mean, I read over 200 books, but there's none that really stand out to me as this is my favorite of the year. There's only one book that I put on this list without having to look at my Goodreads for the year. And other than that, I feel like everything was just good, but not, to me, I compare every book now to Archer's Voice because that book was just so different for me, and the feeling I got when I read that was something that I've been chasing ever since. And I feel like I just didn't really have a lot of books that gave me those vibes this year. But I have compiled a list of my top 10 books of the year. I did decide to cut off my reading year at the end of November, so anything that I read in December will just get put into next year's top books and worst books and whatever. So these are just going to be the top 10 that I read between January and November. So these are not necessarily going to be books that were published in 2022, just books that I read in 2022. I do have these in order, so I'm going to start with number 10 and work my way up to the best book of the year. So in number 10's spot is Lessons in Sin by Pam Godwin. This is a book that I picked up really randomly and wasn't expecting to love as much as I did. There were definitely a scene or two in this book that I could have done without, to be honest, but I just thought this was so different and not like anything else that I read this year. I just felt like this one was really interesting. It follows a girl who ends up getting dropped off at this sort of all-girls boarding school that's run by this guy that's basically a priest, I guess, and she ends up getting in trouble and spending a lot of time with him, basically, and it sort of goes from there. It's obviously, forbidden and taboo and whatever and all those things. But like I said, there was a scene or two could have done without, but other than that, I just thought this was really interesting and definitely different than anything else I read this year. And so I thought it was worth making the list. Part of how I decided which books were going to make this list was I went through all the books I read on Goodreads and just kind of looked at them and I was like, do I even remember what this book is about at this point? And a lot of these are books that I can still vividly imagine scenes from them in my head without having to even read the synopsis of the book again. And so that's sort of, to me, what makes a book top 10 tier, basically. Number 9 is Broken Vow by Sophie Lark. This one is part of her Brutal Birthright series, and I knew this was going to be my favorite one just because of the characters in it, and also I had seen some different quotes and things from it on TikTok and stuff, and I knew that this one was gonna be my favorite because it follows a guy who's essentially a rancher or a cowboy type thing, and I don't know why, but I've been really vibing with that this year, and so I was really excited to get this one, and it did not disappoint. If you haven't heard of this series, it is a mafia romance series, but she calls it Mafia Light, I think, because it's a mafia rom-com almost. And they're definitely a lot easier to get into. If you've never read a mafia romance, they're definitely very, very easy to just pick up and read without being familiar with any of that. This one follows Riona, who was one of my favorite characters in the previous book, and at the end of the book that comes before this one, you sort of get a little bit of a tease of her and this guy, Rylan, and I just loved their entire relationship. She basically, there's an attempt to kill her, and so her brother is okay, you need a bodyguard, we're gonna call in this guy that she hates and he's gonna babysit you, basically, and she is so mad about it, and they go out to his ranch and that's just where they're hiding out, and it was just so good. I really love this one. It's definitely my favorite in the entire series, and like I said, I knew it was gonna be just from how much I had seen about it, but it is definitely worth the hype. Next at number 8 is Go Hex Yourself by Jessica Clare. This was my favorite witchy romance I read this year. This one gave me definite Halloween Town vibes. It follows a girl who answers a job posting in the newspaper, and she thinks it's for a card game that she plays, but it turns out she's actually being interviewed to be a witch's familiar, and she sort of thinks that this lady is just kind of nuts, and she's like, okay, sure, I can help her do laundry and cook and whatever and let her think she's a witch, whatever. But she has her nephew living with her, and her nephew cannot stand this girl that's been hired as the familiar because he's she doesn't believe in magic, she's basically stupid, she doesn't even know what's going on, she thinks it's all made up, and blah blah blah, and he just cannot stand her, and it's definitely enemies to lovers. And like I said, it was my favorite witchy romance that I read this year. There's a second one coming out next year, which I'm super excited for. But I just thought this one was really good. The guy's name in it is even Caliban, kind of like Calabar in Halloween Town. I thought that was funny. I just really, really vibed with this one for whatever reason. This was one that I read when I was sort of in a reading slump, and I found that I flew through it super quickly because I was loving it so much. Next at number 7 is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is the only YA book on this list, and honestly probably the only YA book that I've ever given such a high rating to. I loved this book. I don't read a ton of YA anymore, but I picked this one up for a video I was doing and absolutely loved it. One of my biggest sort of issues with YA is that I find they're very unrelatable, not just to me now being older, but also to me when I was in high school. Like, I read a lot of these books and I'm like, okay, even if I was 14, I still wouldn't relate to this book. And I found that this one was the opposite. This book literally could have been written about me, and it was just so wild to like read it, honestly. It follows a girl who, there's like this guy that moves back to this school that she's going to, and she's like, oh, I have to get him to notice me, like blah blah blah, like I need this guy, basically. And so this guy that lives next door to her is like, well, why don't we pretend we're dating, and then he'll see that you're older and that you're dating, and that, you know, maybe he'll then put 2 and 2 together that maybe you two should date if we, like, you know, fake break up. And she's like, yeah, okay, like that sounds great, like let's do that and whatever. But she's spending all this time with this neighbor who sort of becomes, I feel like, her friend, even though they kind of hate each other. And I just thought this one was so funny and so cute, and like I said, it's so relatable to me. And obviously it's not going to be relatable to everyone, but like to me it just reminded me a lot of what I was like in high school. And so I really enjoyed that and thought it was really well written. Next at number 6 is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This is one I read very early on in the year and I feel like has stuck with me through the whole year. This one follows a couple who, basically it's a girl and her sister's fiance. They get kidnapped together, and this guy that kidnaps them, his thing is he's like a serial killer who likes to make the people he kidnaps fall in love before he kills them. And like right when they fall in love, he kills them. And so these two are now trapped in this guy's basement, and they hate each other. Like, they obviously know each other because it's her sister's fiance, but they can't stand each other and whatever, and now they're kind of thrown in this guy's basement together. And they obviously go through like a very traumatic experience together, and brings them closer together. And I did really, really enjoy this one. At the time, I remember being slightly disappointed by this one because I thought they were going to be in the basement for a lot longer than they were. I think it's only like, they're only in the basement maybe to like the halfway point in the book, and I just wasn't expecting that. I thought the whole book was going to be them in the basement, and so that was kind of odd for me, but I did think that the book was really memorable. Like I said, I read this probably in January, I would guess, and I still can remember it vividly, like the entire storyline, right down to like what kind of sandwiches they were eating, which I feel like is a good sign with a book if you can remember that much detail like a year later, basically. And so this one was definitely one that stood out to me this year as one of the better books that I read. Next at number 5 is Always Been You by QB Tyler. I knew I wanted a QB Tyler book in this video, but honestly it was so hard for me narrowing down just one because I honestly wanted to put them all on here, and so I finally narrowed it down to what I think might be my favorite. I honestly don't know because I love them all, but Always Been You is about a girl who was adopted and she ends up dating her brother, basically. But her brother, I think there's like a big age gap. Like, I think he was 13 when they adopted her, and he moves out when he's 18. So by the time she's 5, he's already moved out from the house and is gone. So they have always been like sort of close, but at the same time they didn't grow up together, and she is adopted, so they're not like blood relatives, and they didn't grow up together. So it was like not as weird as it sounds, I feel like. But I did really, really love this one. I feel like there was just like a really good level of like tension between them at the beginning when she ends up at his apartment, and they're kind of like, oh wait, is that what he means? It's like, is that what she's thinking? Like, they're not sure if they're both on the same page, but they're like, it was just so good. I really, really love this one. Like I said, I have such a hard time picking like a favorite QB Tyler book, but I think if I really had to, this would probably be it. I really, really love this one. Number 4 was To Love Jason Thorne by Ella Mays. This one I was really surprised by. I actually didn't think I was going to love this one as much as I did. I had seen it hyped up a lot on TikTok, and by the time I got to this one, I feel like I had kind of given up on TikTok books. I just honestly don't vibe with most of them, and so I wasn't really going into this with super high hopes or expectations, but I had actually seen this one and To Hate Adam Connor recommended prior to them blowing up on TikTok. I'd seen them back when they had like the old covers with the guys on the front, And so they were kind of already on my radar, so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give them a shot. They both have the one of them is famous trope, which is one of my favorite tropes of all time. And so I gave this one a shot. I absolutely loved this book. It is a brother's best friend. They knew each other when they were kids, and she ends up writing a book, and he is an actor, and so he ends up basically being the person they want to play the guy in the book she wrote. And so they kind of get thrown back together. They haven't seen each other since they were kids, and obviously, like I said, it was her brother's best friend, so he was around a lot when they were little, and now they are around each other a lot as adults, and it was just really, really good. Like, I really loved this one. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to, but it was so good. I loved everything about it, and I just really, really enjoyed it. I do think there's like different versions of this book. If you've heard me like talk about this before, you know this. I personally read the original version with the guy on the cover, and I think that version is the best version, personally. There have been some changes made to the newer versions, which I wasn't a particular fan of, but I know like why they did it, but personally I just prefer the first one. And so this one was one that I did really, really love as well. Next was Little Lies by H. Hunting, or Helena Hunting. This is the first book in her new spin-off series. It is the spin-off of the Pucked and the All In series. So it's sort of like a next gen where it's the kids from the couples in those books. So this one follows Lavender and Kodiak. Kodiak is the son of the couple from the first All In book, and Lavender is the daughter of the couple from the first Pucked book. And I really, really loved this one. Easy 5 stars, and I've seen a lot of people say that the second one in this series is just as good, so I'm really excited to get to that. This one is more of a new adult hockey romance. It's very reminiscent of Off Campus almost, and I just really enjoyed this one. It sort of has like a childhood friends to enemies to lovers arc, because they were best friends when they were kids. Obviously all of these couples in the other books, they all sort of hang out together. They all played for the same hockey team. And so these two have sort of grown up together, but then they end up sort of getting separated, and they don't see each other as much, and now they are in college, and she is living, I believe, with her brothers, and because of that, this guy is always there because he's still friends with her brothers. And so he's always around, and he's just like kind of mean to her, and it goes from there. But I just really, really love this one. Like I said, I highly, highly recommend this one. This was one of the ones that was very easy for me to put on this list. I knew it was going to be somewhere on here because I did really, really enjoy it. Coming in at number 2 was Juniper Hill by Devney Perry. I loved this book. This was such an easy one to put on this list as well. This one is the second book in the Eden series, and I love the first one as well, but something about this one just hit different. They're small town, and this one was single mom, and basically she moves to this town to take this job at an inn, and the whole series follows the Eden family, and they all sort of are like they're like the staple family of this town, or like the founding family or something like that. And so they all are very much intertwined, I guess. So like the one sister, she runs the inn, and so she is hiring this girl, and she's like, no, like it's fine, come. And the girl is like, I can't find anywhere to live, like there's nowhere that's available right now. And the sister is like, no, I understand, like the real estate this time of year is terrible, like you can stay with my brother, like he has a guest house, he doesn't use it, he won't mind. And so this girl shows up to live in this other girl's brother's guest house, and she shows up, and this brother had no idea that she was coming. This brother is Knox Eden, who this book is about, and he is kind of like, okay, you promised this random girl my guest house without even telling me. And he's like kind of mad about the whole thing, and the girl right off the bat is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that, you know, she hadn't told you, like I'll leave, like don't worry about it. And the sister's like, you will not, like you will stay. And she obviously ends up staying, and this girl is just constantly worried that like the baby crying is annoying this guy, and like that she needs to get out of there as quickly as she can because he can't stand her. And he also happens to be a chef at the restaurant at this inn, and so he's at the inn all the time, she's working at the inn, and his sister owns the inn. So they're just like, or I guess her sister doesn't own the inn, I think the whole family owns the inn, but the sister kind of runs it. And so he is kind of bumping into her all the time. They're constantly around each other. This one was just so, so good. If you love small town romances, this one is a really, really good one. Or like single parent trope, this one's really good for that as well. And the book coming in as my top favorite of the year is Everything for You by Chloe Leese. This was the one book when I knew I was filming this video that I knew for certain would be on this list without me even having to bring up Goodreads. I gave this 4.5 stars, I think, when I read it, but it's one of those books that's sort of grown on me since I read it. Like, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, no, that was definitely a 5-star book. This book has every single trope that I love in it. It is age gap, it's grumpy sunshine, they play on the same soccer team, it's MM, so it's like two guys who are on the same soccer team and they both end up being co-captains, but it's like enemies to lovers, they hate each other at the beginning, but at the same time, the guy, Oliver, who is like this is part of the Bergman Brothers series, so Oliver is one of the Bergmans, so he has always kind of looked up to this other guy as like his soccer idol, and you know, like as a kid he was like, oh, I want to be like him and whatever, and he ends up playing with him and he's kind of like, okay, like this wasn't worth it, like he's not as nice as I was hoping and all this stuff, but they're also neighbors, and Oliver is just so like peppy and happy, and this other guy is such a grump that he just like can't stand him. But this was just so good. There's an only one bed scene in this. Like, literally every good trope is in this book. I just absolutely love this one. I think even if you're not going to read any of the other books in this series, read this one. It is a standalone, so you don't have to read the other ones. But it was just so good. And like, as soon as I read this, I knew it was going to be on this video. Like I said, I gave it 4.5 stars, but it's definitely a 5-star read because I absolutely love this one and I haven't stopped thinking about it since. But those are my top 10 books that I read this year. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I'm currently doing new book videos every single day for the month of December, and I will see you next time.